So Hegseth is saying that the battle for Hormuz, the Strait of Hormuz, is separate and distinct from the Iran war. The Secretary of Defense distanced Project Freedom, which is a military operation, the latest effort to reopen from the Strait, from the rest of the Iran war. He said that the American-led operation to open the Strait is, quote, separate and distinct from the wider war with Iran, the most concrete public admission yet that the conflict has evolved beyond its original scope. Now, this is part of this sort of absurd notion that President Trump alone believes that the U.S. military is somehow going to help protect ships moving through the Strait. Two American flag commercial ships and several naval destroyers have tried to pass through the Strait and faced a lot of fire from Iranian missiles. In fact, Trump quietly exposed, let's get this out here so you guys can see. Trump quietly exposed that 111 missiles were launched at a U.S. aircraft carrier during this military operation and were all shot down, which is wild, a wild thing to just casually drop. The Iranians are 100% trying to sink American aircraft carriers, okay? So that alone, it's called a clue, and it's a pretty big one, that this is a real military operation. UAE has said air defenses are dealing with another round of air and drone attacks. I mean, Trump is he says the regime is made up of mentally ill people and will not allow lunatics to acquire a nuclear weapon. Citation needed. He says we have completely destroyed the capabilities of the Iranian military, that coming within 60 minutes of the UAE having to shoot down Iranian military weapon systems. So this is a level of lies that's comical. But I think the important part to understand is that Hegseth needs to lie about this. He needs to lie. He needs to claim that U.S. forces deployed to this hostile fire zone, and he needs to pretend like this Strait of Hormuz thing is completely separate and completely unrelated to the Iran war. The reason he needs to tell that lie is because otherwise what he is doing is illegal. Congress is required under U.S. law to be formally notified of a military deployment, and Congress has to affirmatively authorize a military deployment 60 days after that deployment happens. But President Trump is President Hegseth is lying by saying, listen, the Iran war ended with the ceasefire, but now, like minutes later, a new war began, resetting the clock. This is, of course, you may say to yourself, well, couldn't any president simply play the same game with any military operation? For example, if George Bush didn't have authorization to commit troops to the war in Iraq, he could simply say, well, listen, the first 60 days was the invasion toppling of the Saddam regime. And then now we're in a new operation called the occupation. And every 60 days he goes, oh, well, technically it's a new operation. Now it's consolidation one. They kind of tried to do that, right? But like let's see, Army campaign, the Iraq campaign streamers, I think, were a bunch of things that were like, technically you have like Iraq War 1, Iraq War 2. There's 14 different streamers, right? So there's Liberation of Afghanistan, Consolidation 1, Consolidation 2, Consolidation 3, Transition 1, Transition 2. And I mean, you can see some of these are like comically small. And Iraq also had Liberation of Iraq, Transition of Iraq 2. These sound like shitty movies. Iraqi governance, national resolution, Iraqi surge, Iraqi sovereignty, New Dawn. And then you got into Inherent Resolve, a different operation. But you see, this is a real different operation because U.S. troops withdrew largely from Iraq and ended combat operations in 2011. And then it was like 3 years later that they went in for Inherent Resolve, for abeyance and intensification. So I point these things out because this isn't a new game, but but it's never been used for this purpose, to obfuscate, to hide reality from Congress. And I would like to point out that reality, like, you can't press conference your way away from reality, okay? And this is what I mean by this. Here we go. Here's a 6-month Brent crude chart. The war began February 28th, okay? So look at the price of oil. Price of oil just tells us reality up front, right? February 28th, war launches, $71 a barrel. Within 12 days, oil's trading $100 a barrel. And it cannot dip sustainably below that level, basically no matter what the president does. Can't get below 90. Typically, can't get below 100. And this should tell you, is this all part of the same operation? Yeah, it is. And you can see here, again, when you look at the charts of probabilities, you can see that even as far back as April 2nd, people were saying, oh, there's actually the Hormuz traffic returning to normal by end of May. Basically, those probabilities have dropped to essentially nothing. Right, you have this reality. I love this, drop into zero. But you have this reality that this is a single persistent war, right? Markets whose job it is to accurately as possible, price in future cash flows. Okay, that is what a market measures, and or future prices. And you can see the oil market says, listen, when this incident started, prices elevated, and they remain elevated while this is going on. So let's tie it off right there. Okay, though I got to add this. He said, Project Freedom, distinct from a military operation, is, quote, defensive in nature, focused in scope, and temporary in duration. But that is exactly things that Pete Hegseth has also used to characterize Operation Epic Fury. Again, he says we're not allowing ourselves to get distracted, but they are currently distracted, because this has nothing to do with Iran's nuclear program, and the missile program, and the drone program, which was already destroyed, according to the president. So again, just the notion that the ceasefire is intact, but also Iran has fired 110 missiles at us and is currently bombing the UAE. It's just comical. Or it'd be comical if it wasn't lives at stake. And I get it. The Iranians don't gain that much from targeting U.S. warships. They're the hardest shell to crack. It's like you're playing a video game in the boss fight, right? Every boss has like the heavily armored part, and then they always have like a secret soft spot you can shoot. The Iranians are like, we're not stupid. The soft spot is obviously your Gulf partners, who you are financially tied to and politically tied to. We're just going to bomb them again and again. Hey, thanks for the 14 Canadian Gadzooks. What would Lou Gossett Jr. think of the Iran situation if he were around today? Around Ione. I have no idea who Lou Gossett Jr. is, and I'm afraid to ask. He's an actor. Rest in peace, I guess. He was a gunnery sergeant and an officer and a gentleman. Personal life, he was married 3 times, father's son, and adopted another. His first marriage was annulled. He was hospitalized with COVID-19 and died of COPD at a rehab center in California of heart failure and AFib. I don't know. I can't tell you anything about what I think he would feel. I have no idea who that is. But that was a really specific name. Yeah. The one thing that's even more bizarre, though, is the current S&P 500. Now, as we've talked about, the S&P just like is not that exposed to oil in the short term, but they're going to be exposed to the demand destruction of this in the long and medium term. And obviously, I mean, it's so bizarre, guys. It's hard to overstate how fucking weird this is. You can see the market literally tanking as it realized the war was going to go on, and then it just sort of convinced itself that something else was true. And I am just kind of confused. And I want to point out, though, if you bought in December of 2024 at 60.90, you would have to wait until like June of 2025 to recoup your losses. I guess that's not that long. But you can see that if you bought in December of 2021 at 47, you would have had to wait until 2 years to get your stuff back, to remake it. So sometimes I think that you may have a situation where you either have the balloon deflating slowly, or you have you may have shorts, and shorts can also push a price up. If people are steadily short selling means you buy today on credit with a promise to pay it back later. And basically in effect, you make money when something goes down. Ace Camps, thanks for the 10. Paul, you're Trump's closest political advisor. He always trusts your word. You both sit down and place your hand on his shoulder with a deadpan face. What advice would you give him? I would say that, how would you get out of this? Okay, so I'm going to assume I'm Trump's advisor and that I don't have to like convince him. He just takes my advice. I would say that he needs to get the Iranians to, I would honestly just declare victory. Declare victory. Say the Iranians are going to be terrified to ever develop a nuclear weapon. Their enriched uranium is buried under rubble. They're never going to get it. And I would say it sucks that they're going to charge for transit through the Strait of Hormuz. We've got to go home. The American people elected me to be America first. We have achieved our objective, and we are going home. And countries are going to say, listen, we'll continue negotiations with the Iranians in good faith. Again, I would almost, we'll continue discussion with the Iranians in good faith. We'll say, listen, we reserve the right to strike proxies, particularly the Houthis that try to disrupt Red Sea traffic. But what goes on in the Strait of Hormuz is Hormuz's problem. And I would focus on spin. There's not really a lot of fixing he can do here, but I would focus entirely on the domestic agenda. I would focus on the stock market. I would focus on the economy. I would tell people, listen, the best way to rapidly lower oil prices and lower gas prices, because right now, zero oil is going through the Strait of Hormuz. Americans are probably going to start seeing some gas shortages. But if the Iranians just take a toll, that's going to result in a little bit higher prices, but not by much, right? And producers may simply raise their volume to compensate for it. So that's what I would say. That's what I would say. And if he says some shit about Iran getting a nuclear weapon, I'd say if people start seething about Iran getting a nuclear weapon, I would say Iran would never dare mess with the United States because we have the largest nuclear arsenal in the world. And they know that if they were to attempt to launch a nuclear weapon or detonate a nuclear weapon anywhere near America or its NATO allies or its treaty-bound allies, they know we're going to glass them. We have thousands of times more nuclear weapons than they could ever build. So mutually assured destruction applies to the Iranians too. He'll say, don't worry about the Israelis because they have nuclear weapons. And if Iran tries to do anything to Israel, they will also turn Tehran into a parking lot. And that's that. You go home. You end this debacle and you try to get prices down going into the midterms. You try to focus people's attention on the other issues. That's the best advice I could give him. And I know it's not that great. Right? Because if there's one thing Trump has demonstrated the ability to do, it's to flip the national conversation. Remember, Epstein files are fucking gone, dude. Epstein files have receded into the past, despite the credible documents released indicating that President Trump specifically sexually assaulted a child. And that account was confirmed to have many accurate details. Whoever made those allegations, one, sought no payday, actually stopped communicating when the FBI told them that they would never pursue charges, that it would never result in federal charges. That person never brought Trump to court. So they had there's no paid component to it. That person provided details describing specific people in specific places that were all corroborated. It's extremely credible allegations. And Trump has just deleted that from the national conversation. Nobody's talking about it because we got to fucking blow up Iran or die for Israel or whatever. And so he needs to just apply that skill to something else. Maybe like arrest like an Epstein associate, like arrest every Democrat Epstein associate. And that'll 180 the national conversation. That's what I would say. I mean, if I was an advisor, well, we won't talk about, I mean, I would never be one of his advisors. I would have resigned. I would have never participated, and I would have resigned when he, again, called American protesters domestic terrorists. Anyway, guys, make sure you guys hit the subscribe button. Check out another video here. And, of course, become a member at combatvetnews.com for access to an entire archive of premium videos, including combat footage that YouTube would never let me show you. The link is in the description. And, of course, a huge thanks to all of the Combat Vet News members.